One thing I want to talk about is terminal connections and how you know what size leader to use. I'm sure you've all been on the boat with a buddy who's been like, ooh, I just broke off a big fish, and you bring it back and you try to analyze what exactly went wrong and what broke. What I try to do is I take that evil out of the equation before I even leave the dock. And I do that by testing all my connections before I go, and I tie up my rigs the night before. All of my rods would be in the back of the truck before fishing the next day, and I would have everything already rigged. I use a wind-on leader system that I tie myself, which is a whole nother video. I've got a different terminal connection that I use depending on what sort of fishing I'm going to be doing, but everything is on the rod, rigged, ready to go, so that when I get to the grounds, I don't have to do anything but pick the bait that I want to fish and throw it out there. And you can do it in a controlled environment, not on a rocking boat. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to test the difference between a knot and a crimp. On one end of this 60-pound Yo-Zuri, and that's its rating, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it's going to break at. I'm going to tie the terminal knot that I typically use, which is 2 times through, and as many twists as you can safely get and still cinch it down. I usually go about 4. As you get higher in the line rating, the less twists you're going to be able to get. This will come out of view for a second so I can cinch it down. On 40-pound leader material, I might be able to get more twists. Make sure that's snug. Nothing's twisted in there. On the other end, I'm going to put a crimp. I'm going to make sure that I've got a clean cut on the edge of my line here, because getting the crimp into the tightest crimp that you can get is paramount to getting a good crimped connection. So we'll take our crimp out, slide our line through. This side we're going to put one of our ringed grommets, which is what I typically use on my jigging setups as opposed to my casting setups. Spinning reels put a half a twist in your line every time you make a full revolution. The conventional gear that you jig with does not do that, so you can use this ring grommet, which typically increases the strength of your connection. So I put a little bell or dome on the end of the braid, or on the end of the leader there. Pull it off. This way you can put some pressure on this connection. I can get about 15-20 pounds on that connection without even putting a crimp on it. So that's just by burning and flaring out that tag end if you have the crimp the right size. What I do here at the house is I have a couple different pairs of crimpers. I like my preset braid crimpers, but I give it a quick compression because I can get a better bite on it with just my regular pair of, I don't know, whatever sort of crappy crimpers these are. Then I take my braid ones, which are calibrated. The only reason I do that other crimp first is because the braid ones sometimes roll the crimp sideways because of the ratcheting system. So these will release, and you'll hear it once the crimp is set. So again, I put pressure on this crimp. I want this line as tight as I can possibly get it inside that crimp. You just heard it release. And there's my crimp. No wings, no flare outs, Just a tiny bit, you can see it there, but I know that that's a good crimp right there. So next thing we do is we take our spring scale. This is a Shimano spring scale that's somewhat calibrated. Again, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. We're just testing the effectiveness of one knot versus the other. So it doesn't really matter if 40 pounds is 40 pounds or 42 pounds. We're just going to go for the difference from one knot to the other knot and see which is better for us to use, and also see how much we can get out of 60-pound leader. So we've slid this back up to 0. Put it down here between our feet. Hook on our terminal tackle. Take a couple wraps on the line and look the other way. I'd usually put this between my legs so it won't shoot out my face. I pulled that side till it broke. Bottomed out the 50-pound scale. And I was well past the bottom. I could feel when the scale stopped moving. That was on my ringed grommet side. So that's 60-pound Yo-Zuri getting well over 50 pounds, which very few reels can even fish that heavy. So you don't need a 180-pound leader or some real high stuff unless you need extra abrasion resistance or something like that. Now if we go to an improved clinch knot, same 60-pound. That one didn't quite make it, I could feel it. 48 pounds. I know from my previous testing of these two methods that on the heavier leader that you're going to get a better result from these ring grommets, and the reason that you do is because it opens up the loop. That first loop of your knot is wider. The tighter you tie something to, the smaller you tie something to, the weaker your knot, because the tighter the bend, grab that leader material again, the tighter that bend in that loop, the weaker your knot gets. One of the things that people buy when they start jigging are these pressed rings, and they're almost flat pressed out of here. You tie a knot onto these, I'll do one, same line. We'll go single clinch, 4 or 5 loops, through and back through. There's your normal knot that most fishermen are tying. Put my glove on. Again, that tag end's not going to affect the strength of the knot, so take a couple wraps. Same leader, same everything considered. That just broke at 35 pounds on a pressed ring with a clinch knot. We got 48 pounds with a double on a swivel, and we got well over 50, probably closer to 55, 56 pounds with a ringed grommet on the same 60-pound leader material. So when somebody tells me they use 60-pound leader and they got broke off by a big fish, first thing I'm going to ask them is what sort of connection were you using? So if you have a choice, use a round ring over a pressed ring. Use a ringed grommet over anything, but if you're going to use casting or spinning gear that's going to put that line twist in it, you want to go with a swivel. You go with a smaller swivel, you're going to be hard pressed to get that line strength. This is either a 170 or a 220 Spro, and it's big enough that it lets you fit a good strength split ring on there as well. So the bottom line is you've got to test your equipment. You've got to know what it's capable of so that when you do hook into a fish, you know how much pressure you can put onto it. We just had 3 very different results from the same exact line. And if I had other people here tying the knots, we'd get different results as well. So it's not that you need to know that you fish with 60-pound Yo-Zuri or a 100-gram rod or a 500-gram rod. It doesn't really matter. You need to test your own products, the things that you're using out of your tackle box, so that you can feel confident when you get out there and those fish are jumping. And I know that when I go, if anything breaks, it's my own fault, and I've got no one to blame but me. But I've done my homework, and I feel that I'm as prepared as I can be, and I recommend that you do the same thing. Thanks for watching.